welcome to another extended edition of the I-24 News Desk. I'm Batch 11 coming to you live from our Tel Aviv studios with the top stories this hour. In big news here in the Middle East, on Friday, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met with Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian in Jeddah. The high-level talks took place just one day after Iran's foreign minister met with his Saudi counterpart in Riyadh on his first visit to the kingdom since the two nations reconciled. The meetings are further indications that relations between the two former foes continues to thaw, and their bitter rivalry that destabilized the region may be a thing of the past. Both Iran and Saudi Arabia also recently reopened their respective embassies following the normalization deal that was signed in Beijing back in March. Let's cross now to Washington, D.C., where I'm joined by Behnam Taleblu, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Appreciate you being here with me this evening. What can the region now be expecting? Former foes, now friends. Does this mean an end to their proxy wars as well?
It's a pleasure to be with you. I'd be a little careful not to read too much depth where there may be only a bit more breadth. But this is part and parcel of two things that we've been seeing going on in the region for quite a while now. Number one is Iran trying to build off of the military successes it's had indirectly through its proxies in the region by trying to offer some of the more classic Arab states in the Persian Gulf who are partners and allies of the U.S. and who potentially may be candidates for future normalization with Israel, by trying to rope-a-dope them, by trying to say that the West won't ultimately support them, and through a knife and a handshake, get them to accommodate Tehran more on balance than they contest Tehran. On the Saudi side, I think it's largely part of a larger hedging strategy you've seen by the GCC as well. Between the Eastern and Western blocs, this deal that you mentioned was, of course, brought to you by Chinese, the PRC moderation, even though there was a bit more direct bilateral Saudi-Iranian diplomacy for a year and a half that went nowhere and went nowhere fast. So long story short, these two trends are going to continue, but they may not yield much. And that does give, the West, the international community, a bit more of an opportunity to remind each side of that which they threaten each other with still.
Now, Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer was visiting Washington over their recent reconciliation. Israel clearly not happy with this development, but should one issue weigh more heavily for the Israelis, either deterring Iran's nuclear program or normalizing ties with the Saudis?
Well, given what I've seen in my limited experience traveling to Israel, I think the Israelis are quite capable of walking and chewing gum at the same time. The larger mission of deterring and potentially even rolling back the Islamic Republic's nuclear capabilities, and even trying to put a dent in towards its regional proxy strategy through what is popularly called the war between the wars, can exist regardless of any kind of larger diplomatic outreach to the Saudis or potentially to any other country in the region that is or could be seeking to normalize relations with Jerusalem. So that's my larger 500,000-foot take. But again, everyone should be cautious and watch and wait to see how both Tehran and Riyadh frame this recent engagement and what the trend lines for future engagement could be.
And speaking of framing, how does this tie into American politics? The U.S. has somewhat strained ties to Saudi Arabia, but like Israel, is also very wary of Iran. Does that make the Biden admin, in terms of their relationships, are they going to become closer to Saudi Arabia, closer to Iran? Where exactly do they stand here?
Well, in many ways, and if I had to, with immense respect, point a finger for the original sin of what even got the Saudis to hedge towards the Iranians in the first place, it is, a bipartisan foreign policy failure to recognize that Saudi Arabia remains and is a key U.S. strategic partner in the region, but also the failure to be able to, again, on the Republican and Democratic side, to be able to credibly signal that they can counter and deter and roll back the Islamic Republic's nuclear and non-nuclear aggression. And that explains why, the Saudis reached out to the Chinese, which is a major trading partner of both Tehran and Riyadh. So again, Washington's, distancing of Saudi Arabia and inability to properly counter Iran helped bring about this situation. So unless Washington, under any administration, does those two things, embraces Saudi Arabia, but also, more importantly, counters Iran, incredibly counters its nuclear and non-nuclear threats, you can expect to see some of these trend lines grow.
Behnam Taleblu, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, appreciate your thorough analysis on what may be seen to some, at least in the region, as the shifting of tectonic plates in the Middle East, but as you so clearly put it, perhaps more breadth than actual depth.
Thank you.